This is Wycombe Sound.
Hello, you're listening to The Art Show on 106.6 FM. My name is Dane Cobain, I'm your host. This is the local radio show where we talk about the local art scene, we try and cover events, we have a different guest on each week. We also later on in the show will share some entertainment recommendations for you, including an album review from Twangling Jack Ford over in the Ilk Shed, plus a book review and a TV show or movie. As I said, my name is Dane Cobain. You can reach me here at the studio on dane.cobain@wycombesound.org.uk. That's dane.cobain @wycombesound.org.uk. And I particularly want to hear from people who are poets, musicians and other performers who might have MP3s that we can share here on the show. And we'll be playing a few of those later on. You can also find The Art Show on Facebook. If you just search for The Art Show Wycombe Sound on Facebook, you should be able to find us. We're also repeated here on Wycombe Sound on Monday nights, and you can find us on, I upload it to YouTube, it's on Spotify, iTunes, and other sort of podcasty players as well, so you can catch up if you miss a show and you still want to sort of check out who we're chatting to. So I want to give a bit of a shout out to Victoria Snaith, who is a previous one of our guests, and she's got a new show. Well, it's actually like an old show. It's called Patient 4620. I'll read out her post here. So Edinburgh Horror Festival goes live tomorrow. There are plenty of shows from which to choose. Many of them are free or donation based, but if you fancy something new and different, try ours, Patient 4620 Interactive Horror. And you can find that. It's £5 at edhorrorfest.co.uk. She also reached out to me, and maybe you guys who are listening in can help me with this. She wanted to know if I had any idea who's behind the short horror film called The Horror, which is due to be filmed in High Wycombe. Now, I don't. The only person I could think of was my friend Matt Sears, who we also had on the show, who's I think he's based, he works in Marlow. I think he might live in Maidenhead. I'm not entirely sure where he's based at the moment, but he's a local filmmaker, so I reached out to him. But he had no ideas as well, so I'm also clueless. So if you've heard of The Horror, please do reach out to me at the studio on again dane.cobain@wycombesound.org.uk, or you can find our Facebook page. I guess the other horror news, because obviously it's spooky season, what with Halloween being this weekend. Well, actually on the 31st, Saturday the 31st, on the day of Halloween, it's my cat's birthday. So that's one thing. But also Sam Pritchard is hosting, I think it's called Bourne End Art at what used to be Bourne End train station. Again, if you give it a little bit of a Google, you should be able to find it. There's an event page set up for it and stuff. But I should be there, hopefully selling signed copies of my new book, Meat, which I talked about last time. It's finally out after about 5 years of pretty hard work on that. And so yeah, I feel like I have to promote that here. Shout out as well to Amanda de Grey and also Dr. Caroline Elliott, two local High Wycombeites who helped to sort of combined proofread and beta read really of the final draft of the manuscript as well. It's now in my hands, and as I say, signed copies are available, so tweet me if you would like one. I'm going to read you the blurb to give you a little bit more of an idea of what you can expect from it, and then we're going to jump straight on in and listen to a bit of local music, and then we're going to talk to this week's guest, who is Martin Gray. He's a poet. He's got a book out called The Pretty Boys of Gangstertown. That's out through Fly on the Wall Poetry Press, which is run by Isabel Kenyon, who is another previous guest we've had. So he's going to be joining us later on in the show to talk poetry and also to share a few readings from his poetry collection. But first, I guess I'm going to read to you from the blurb of my book. So this is Meat by Dane Cobain. Out now, please buy a copy. Alright, veterinarian Tom Copeland takes a job at a factory farm called Sunnyvale after a scandal at his suburban practice. His job is to keep the animals alive for long enough to get them to slaughter. But there are rumours of a strange creature living beneath the complex, accidents waiting to happen on brutal production lines, and the threat of zoonotic disease from the pigs, sheep, cows, chickens and fish that the complex houses. Suddenly, disaster rocks Sunnyvale, and cleaners, butchers, security guards and clerical staff alike must come together under the ruthless leadership of CEO John MacDonald. Together, they'll learn what happens when there's a sudden change to the food chain. Bon appetit. So that was the blurb for my new novel, Meat. Do go ahead and check that out if it sounds interesting to you. It's actually the book that turned me vegan, the research for it, and then writing the final manuscript. So make of that as you will. We're going to listen to a bit of local music now, and this is super exciting because this is Slady. They're an all-female Slade tribute band, and this is them performing Just a Little Bit at the Railway Hotel on the 15th of October 2020. Obviously, as a live recording, the audio isn't like super amazing, although I think it's good enough. But to be honest, we just have to celebrate the fact that any live music in any form is possible at this point. So this is Slady with Just a Little Bit, performed live.
Love music, love talk, love Wycombe sound.
Inspired to develop young minds? You could teach or instruct with Buckinghamshire College Group. We're recruiting for English, maths, construction and motor vehicle teachers, as well as construction instructors. You don't necessarily need a teaching qualification, as all required training will be provided, based at our Aylesbury, Wycombe and Amersham campuses. If you're looking for a career that will challenge and develop you with excellent benefits including pension and generous holidays and free parking, Search Bucks College Group.
For the latest news, reviews and sport, get your copy of the Bucks Free Press this Friday. Bucks Free Press, proudly reporting High Wycombe for 160 years.
Hello, this is Chaz Large. Join me for a new jazz show here on Wycombe Sound. I'll be playing tracks from all the top names in jazz, from Glenn Miller to Courtney Pine, Count Basie to Michael Bublé. Not forgetting the all-time greats like Charlie Parker, Dinah Washington, Frank Sinatra and Dave Brubeck, to name but a few. Listen out soon for Chaz on Jazz.
This is Wycombe Sound.
That was Straight 8 with Girl I Wanna Dance With You, and before that we had Slady performing Just a Little Bit live at the Railway Hotel, like a couple of weeks back I suppose. My name is Dane Cobain, you're listening to The Art Show on 106.6 FM at Wycombe Sound, and I'm joined by this week's guest, who is Martin Gray. He's a poet, he has a collection out which is called The Pretty Boys of Gangstertown, which I really enjoyed. He's published by Fly on the Wall Poetry Press, and we previously had a chat to Isabel Kenyon on the show. And he's going to join us to chat about poetry and also to do readings of a few of his poems. What was the last book that you read and what did you think of it?
So the last poetry book I read was Playtime by Andrew Macmillan, and I thought it was absolutely beautiful. The way he just kind of literally got inside your mind and underneath your skin, and the sort of beautiful way he presented sort of just poems about, you know, sexuality and finding yourself and the sort of insights of life as a gay man and stuff like that. You know, I thought that was just a really beautifully written book. Last fiction book I read, just finished it, was actually Sophie's World, just because I've never read it before, and I'm not sure how, and I just wanted to fix that. And again, I thought it was really fascinating the way Garda combined history of philosophy with just a story about, again, just a young girl just trying to find herself in the world.
Awesome.
Maybe I'm on a mission to try and find myself.
Yeah. The poetry book that you read, have you seen the author perform their poems?
I did, yeah. I saw them at Verve Poetry Festival 2019. Feels like a distant memory going to face-to-face festivals
different world.
now. And yeah. But yeah, he did. There was a Q&A session, and then a reading from the book as well. And yeah, I'd never seen him read before, and it really got me into it.
Awesome. And one of the things I wanted to, I guess, to ask following up with that is, did you then, like, when you read it, do you sort of read the poems in the poet's voice?
I do, yeah. This is, well, when I've seen a poem perform either face to face or on YouTube or something like that, or just listen to them on SoundCloud, I like to do that because I like to read it in the way they would read it.
Yeah.
If I can, I find it really helps with the melody and the flow, and particularly Andrew. Andrew has a really melodic, almost sort of sing-songy type voice when the poems are being read.
Awesome. Yeah, it's kind of funny because I think I did the same with your poems as well, but you make a good point there because I think, especially with poetry, so much of it can hang upon just like the intonation of a sentence, or, you know, how long a pause is or something like that. So I think when you read it in the author's voice, you probably get the closest you can do to being inside their head when they wrote it.
Oh, definitely. And it's when you're really enjoying a poetry book, that headspace is a beautiful place to be. You know, it's a bit like, you know, they give you an insight into certain moments, certain parts of their mind, and you're almost looking between the words to try and find further insight. And I really enjoy doing that. Particularly a really good poetry book, I'll often read every poem twice as I go through it. It takes a bit longer, but I find often a poem reveals itself, and then when you go back to the start and read it through again, you get more than the first reading. Yeah. I find that quite interesting.
For sure, yeah. So in terms of your own poetry, because I've sort of seen you do a couple of readings on the Fly on the Wall channel, what's your approach to performance? Do you memorize your poems, or do you read from the book, or how do you go about them?
So if I can, I like to memorize them. Normally, what I'll start off doing, I'll normally test a piece out at an open mic in its draft stage, and if it feels like it's going down well and the poem has traction, I'll finish it off, and then I'll make a point of taking time to memorize it. So when I perform it as a finished piece, I'm doing it from memory.
Yeah.
So I will tend to have notes with me, just sort of by my feet, because I'll normally forget a word at some point.
Yeah, well, I mean, even I do that all the time with lyrics and stuff with songs as well. So you mentioned open mics, and you know, a lot of your work kind of reflects where you live, which is Nottingham. So perhaps you could tell us about a few of the open mics that you like to go to in Nottingham.
Well, I mean, obviously this is all sort of pre-pandemic, unfortunately, but like Nottingham has a really thriving open mic scene. It's well, for one, it's a city of literature, and it's got loads of local poetry groups, sort of past and present, that have really helped sort of escalate that. So groups in the past, you had groups like Mouthy Poets, which you may have heard of, and then currently there's World Jam, there's DIY Poets, there's Black Drop, who are sort of groups, as well as nights. You've also got it was almost like every week you just think, oh, which open mic am I going to go to this week? And there was always one to suit your need. You know, there was crosswords, speech therapy, poetry scum. Just every week there just seems to be at least one event going on, or at least there was until the pandemic, and I'm sure it will get back to that afterwards. It's really nice community. Have you seen any? Have the kind of people in the community been finding creative ways to overcome the pandemic? Like, have there been, you know, Zoom readings or anything like that? In some cases, yeah. So DIY Poets, which I am part of, is not intended to come over as a plug. You know, we do still have quarterly events. Black Drop still have regular events. Poetry Scum sometimes still meet in person when it's allowed under the rules.
Yeah.
Some nights have very much taken a pause, but some are still going. But I find I don't tend to go to as many Zoom events as I would go to face-to-face events, and I think that's reflected in the wider community.
Yeah.
But there's certainly enough to keep you busy. And the thing about Zoom events is that you can go anywhere. You don't even have to stick to the UK.
I mean, I think a lot of people would think of poetry as quite like an isolated thing that you do by yourself, like probably in a meadow somewhere or whatever, but it's like a very sort of solitary thing. But there is like a big sort of community around it when you sort of dig beneath the surface, I think.
Oh, definitely. And it's certainly in Nottingham there seem to be poets everywhere you look.
Yeah.
And I know that there's some kind of scientific effect for that I can't remember the name of, where when you start looking for something you'll find it everywhere.
Yeah.
But I think whichever town or city you go to, you start digging beneath the surface. There are nights, there are poets, there are organisations. It's just a case of seeking them out. But poetry is everywhere.
Yeah. And again, I suppose we talked a little bit about the more like performance element of poetry, but I think that's something a lot of people don't realise as well, that a lot of the time, just the poem on the printed page is actually only half of the final product, and I think it's sort of been becoming increasingly common these days as well. So I was going to move on to the Pretty Boys of Gangster Town. First off, how did you get involved with Isabel and Fly on the Wall Press?
So this is a case of stars randomly aligning. So Gangster Town refers to Guildford, which is my hometown, and I performed only once there, and Isabel just happened to be at that night, which is how we met. And this was before I'd even conceived the idea for the book. And we just met at that night, and we just kept in touch. And then when it came to finding a publisher, by then she'd started Fly on the Wall, and it seemed a logical approach. Yeah,
for sure. So in terms of the book itself, what was the process like behind creating it? And particularly as well, like, I guess, did you sort of write the poems first and then start to think about how you could bring them together, or did you write them with a book in mind in the end,
So I never wrote the poems initially with a book in mind. It was very much, I was still fairly new as a poet and a performer, and I was going through a combination of like various difficult times all at the same time, and I was writing as much as just a form of venting and a form of therapy as I was in terms of just developing my craft. And then when I decided later on that I just wanted to get a book together, I just looked through the poems I'd written, and a lot of the poems just aligned together, and because I guess I'd just been writing about similar themes because of processing the sort of things I was coping with at the time. So the poems fell into place quite easily in the end. It's in some ways an accidental book, but in other ways I feel that almost makes it stronger in some ways. It's very authentic like that. Yeah,
exactly. And I think you're right, because it does almost have like its own little narrative as well as you sort of read through it. But again, it doesn't feel forced in the way that it might have done if you'd set out to do that.
Well, thank you for picking up that it had a narrative. I was hoping people would notice that.
Well, another thing that I actually didn't notice, and I was just about to ask you about it as well, I didn't notice it until I think after I'd read it and written my review, is that it has like a poem within it as well, in terms of like down by the page numbers, and so you can read through, like there's a word or a couple of words per page, and you can read through that as well.
Oh yeah, that was a bit of a last minute thing in some ways. I think that was my friend Julian was having a look through the manuscript, and he gave the idea for that, because he's quite a visual artist. He was like, why don't you put a poem in the footer? So, I'd love to take credit for that as a totally original idea, but then, it's I feel it's quite a nice thing to have. It is there as a little secret that people can find if they want to look for it. Yeah,
like an Easter egg in a video game or a movie or something.
Oh, definitely.
Cool.
I like trying to find them. The title poem of the book, it's called The Pretty Boys of Gangster Town. Get your swank on, mate. Get yourself down. The boys are on their way to G-Town. Be in Yates by 8 o'clock and learn to flirt with the ladies, you Spock. G was for Guildford. G was for gangster. And those were the words of our Al Capone when small-town boys sought small-town joys every Saturday night. From the Bridge Street bars to Bowes, just down past every place to be in a 3-club town, we'd eyeball the bouncers to check our IDs at every room of sharp-shirted boners sniffing rah-rahs with skirts as high as stoners with their endless mum and dad funds. Daddy's little dirt boxes deflowered during every night I never showed, with every failed attempt to plunder solved by a sours or a tactical chunder until 11. When everything's shut but Bows, the drink and Cinderellas. How they'd flight the alphas when they'd bring, how they'd mock the homeless by Burger King, a mating call for all the fellas for our links affected lack of shame, and how tonight we're off the cocaine. But for small town 18, and all that it seemed, I lost my faith in their hand-me-down dreams, yet through all the strawpedos and a little bad sex, I'd always arise to the cries in their eyes as I learnt to party with a frown, with the pretty boys of Gangster Town. Their adulthood looked effortless, as younger me had been, in scruffy clothes, in scruffy Murphys, where the bouncers were bruisers, the bar was obscene, and the pints of pipe cleaner drowned every last thought for a pair of tenors and a photocopy of my passport that taught us innocence was not to be trusted on the day my dear old scruffies got busted. But the pretty boys were unaware of any other kind of care, and any time I'd hark on back, the dear old scruffies came under attack. I tried to copy how the pretty boys lived, with every last fiver every cash point would give, on semi-alert for the tossers and tools from the daily misery of secondary school, wondering if anyone would ever understand why their town was far from a wonderland. Just the same old streets of photocopied times where it mattered whose dads earned more than mine. I learnt those nights. I learnt them well. I learnt that Gangster Town was hell, that small towns make big choices, that small towns amplify small voices, that small town misfits finish last, that small towns trap you in their future and your past. Gangster Town, where I was from. Gangster Town, where I didn't belong. A town that years ago ceased to exist when the pretty boys abandoned station, leaving the night to a new generation, unaware of the ghost of a stranger called me, who meets my eyes with a party frown when I take a walk down Bridge Street through the remnants of Gangster Town. My ghost looks intently, as I grow older, at the former sight of the chip on my shoulder that put my roots under secret duress when they failed at his idea of success. As if no other town had pretty boys out drinking their cares in awful bars, and no other town would have made me slate the fate I found infused and fading convolutions of teenage confusion. But although I'm locked to that party frown, I clutch a key to my small Surrey town, to the nights behind the Bridge Street walls that built walls in my mind, and how somewhere in all those hand-me-down dreams I found everybody's dreams but mine. A fallow frown, copyright of a little place some teenagers once called Gangster Town.
You're listening to The Art Show on 106.6 FM at Wycombe Sound. My name is Dane Cobain. I'm here in conversation with poet Martin Gray. And this is my band, The Ilk. It's actually my co-ilker, Dave Ford, or Twangling Jack Ford. This is his song. It's called The Vampire Song, and it seems particularly apt at this time of year. So The Ilk with The Vampire Song.
This is Wycombe Sound.
Coming to life, and you feel Your resistance is surrender. Honey, there like a vampire in the night. Lay down, close your eyes, relax, and I will start to write you till you scream. Be my Nosferatu. Be my Nosferatu. Fall into the endless void. Escape before the world is destroyed. I'll take you to a place where everyone knows me. I'll let you meet a friend of mine, the ballad of Rosie. When the darkness has conquered the light, and you feel my love start to die, I'll be there like a vampire in the night. In the night, 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 when my love has banished your frown, and your resistance is surrendered down. I'll be there like a vampire in the night.
That was the Ilk with the Vampire song. Full disclosure, that's my band, so I was the one doing the backing singing. You're listening to The Art Show on 106.6 FM at Wycombe Sound. My name is Dane Cobain, and I'm here in conversation with this week's guest, who is poet and performer Martin Gray. So, do you how long have you been writing poems, and do you remember like any of your early poetry?
Oh yeah, definitely. So I've been writing poetry for about 8-9 years now. I've been performing it for about 7.
Yeah.
I think May 2013 was the first time I got up on a stage. Certainly, none of those early poems got sort of anywhere near the final version of the book, because I think when you first start writing, and I don't know if you found this as well, when you first start writing, you're trying to find your voice, and you're trying to find your style. I went through various styles of writing and styles of performing before I really found what suited me best. So really, I really value those early poems. I never throw a poem away. I've got stacks of paper that I really need to get sorted out. But, they're poems I really value, but they're not really poems I'd perform, especially now.
Yeah. I mean, I think it's funny because I suppose it's a bit like, how you see with bands, and like, say if you go and see the Rolling Stones today, they're still going to have to play Satisfaction and stuff, and obviously they've kind of moved on. And I guess there's almost a bit more bit more freedom there for poets, because if anything, I think poets are probably expected to be talking about something that's very current and very relevant and reflecting the world around them.
Oh, definitely. But then I think I love doing that. I love trying to bring something new to each open mic I go to. But then at the same time, I find it really flattering if someone does request an old one, or perhaps something you'd forgotten about. It's amazing as a poet. Maybe each open mic has 20-30 people out, but when you go around loads of them, it's amazing how many people you see and how many people you may influence, and what you might think is a weaker poem might really get to someone because of maybe something that's on their mind. So I really like it when someone picks an old poem out and wants me to do it.
It's fun because because I think around here at most of the open mics we go to tend to be more music open mics, and I find again, quite often there are people who I know and I like particular songs they've written and whatnot. But with music, it's it's almost easier because you can leave somebody with like a catchy chorus or something that's going to get sort of stuck in their head. Whereas with poetry, you're relying pretty much on the words and the way the words are delivered.
I mean that is true. I think if like for me personally, I quite like a refrain in my writing. I know certainly when I was going through the editing process with Isabel, we took out quite a lot of refrains because some of them were a bit too much. But I think a refrain can almost act like a chorus in some ways if you do it in the right way.
True, yeah. And also, I suppose, on the flip side, because there are other occasions when I've seen people perform and it'll be a particular lyric or something that really stands out to me. And I think it kind of puts more of that focus on essentially the lyrics, you know, on the words. And so it's all, and also there's like not the distraction of music in the background taking you away from the words and their meanings, you know. So I suppose they're both got their advantages like that.
Absolutely. I mean, I love that feeling when you're either reading a poem or you're seeing someone do a poem and you get totally sucked into it to the point where you forget about your surroundings. And then when the poem finishes, it's almost like it jolts you out and you realise that you're in the back room of that pub or something like that. And I love it when a poem sucks you into that degree. Yeah. And I think certainly, you know, you mentioned music open mics. I did try and be in a band a number of years back, and I never quite had the talent or the drive or the lyric writing or anything. So I think poetry very much suits me better in that sense.
Yeah, and that kind of comes back to you know, when you were talking about performing and whatnot as well, and writing and finding your style.
Oh, definitely. I mean, you know, when I first started writing, I've got some like old performance videos from sort of 2013, 2014. Yeah. You know, I try a very slow style. I try a very sort of punky style, a very kind of aggressive, direct styles that were too blurry. And I think all these poems are really important on your journey. And like for any aspiring poet, they're critical poems to have because everything you write, everything you try helps develop you into what you become in the future. Yeah,
yeah. What advice would you have to people who are sort of thinking about writing their own poetry?
My advice would be pretty simple. It's just do it. The poetry community, in my experience, is really friendly, especially to people who come along and want to perform for the first time. Yeah. You know, it's a very friendly and welcoming space, and you know, certainly I always had a tendency to think that my poems were never good enough, or somehow all these other poets I'd see, I didn't feel deserving to be part of that space. But to anyone who wants to get into it, you absolutely are deserving of that, and you'll be absolutely welcome. So you know, get writing, and then when you're ready, just get on that stage, be it in real life or virtual. Yeah. And you know, you get this amazing buzz when you do it. I've never forgotten the buzz of that first poetry gig that I did. I barely slept that night.
Yeah, for sure. Well, I suppose it's like overcoming that imposter syndrome, isn't it? Of, you know, feeling like you can belong and you should belong, and that's the great thing about the poetry community, and especially with like modern poetry as well, because it's not as though, you know, there are kind of fewer constraints, and there's free verse and all kinds of different poetry, like visual poetry, so it doesn't even have to, you know, nonsense poetry, it doesn't have to make sense or anything, so you know, it's almost an anything goes kind of situation.
Absolutely. I have accidentally written some nonsense poems, especially in the early days. They were just not edited very well, but certainly, yeah, there's it's such a free space where, you know, like within reason, you know, anything goes. Yeah.
One last one to end on, and then we'll get you to do a couple of poems. So what have you got planned next, and where can people find out more about you?
So really, at the moment, I'm just trying to get as much attention as I can kind of out there with the book. You know, like I'd love for more people to read it and enjoy it and things like that. In terms of what I got planned next, I have got the beginnings of a second collection that I'm writing, but that's going to be a long time coming. I think certainly, really at the moment, it's just trying to promote what I have, try and practice my writing, try and see how I can develop my style for that second book.
Awesome, cool. And people can find that on Amazon, and it's The Pretty Boys of Gangstertown.
Yeah, that's right. You can get it from a few places. It's on Amazon. It's on Waterstones. It's on my Big Cartel page, martingraypoet.bigcartel.com, And you can also get it from Fly on the Wall Press,
Yeah.
who they've just got loads of brilliant books. And you talk about imposter syndrome. Sometimes, the imposter syndrome never goes away. It just moves on. Now I feel an imposter for having a book out. So this is Fish, Chips, Bread and Butter and a Cigarette. And it's about my granddad. The bus went twice a week back then. A return ticket to Hollywood from a stop by the village well, long since succumbed to a housing development that seemed so modern at the time. The chippy often got him telling me stories from his youth, bold and retold memories, deep fried in my hungry naivety. Him and his friends, they'd wait for ages sometimes. They had to get to the bus stop early, stare down the road in the hope it hadn't passed already, and if they were lucky, they'd catch the coal merchant's bored horse skulking off alone again, or the rag and bone men looking for a bargain. A far cry from the far-flung cinematic worlds of sharp suits and femme fatales awaiting them after the town-centred chippy. A fortnightly tale of its little speciality of fish, chips, bread and butter, and a cigarette. In my still warm fish, I'd taste his story, as if the crunch of teeth on batter could take him back to the bus with me, where the bright-eyed stars of an old man's tale made him 15 again, as it all unveiled. Him, his friends, and I, we'd munch away on sustenance served in yesterday's smudged-out headlines. He'd be as black and white and mid-Atlantic spoken as the movies he saw in between the removable letters above the foyer door, and the black dots flashing every 15 minutes to change the reel once more. I'd ask him all the questions I never thought to ask him at the time, with both our lives ahead of us, instead of only mine over fish, chips, bread and butter, and a cigarette. His factory working, water fetching, vegetable picking ways, Sundays to Fridays and alternate Saturdays left him just enough for the bus, food and matinees. But still less than the pocket money not paying for my still warm fish, in paper so plain it became the canvas for stories lost between then and those days, my still warm chips, the B feature, to a bit of time with the him I never knew. But even with his world at my fingertips, I can't access a place where no history exists, and without his stories I would never understand the younger days of the elderly man who bought me still warm fish and chips all those years ago, when he ate before movies with pre-war naivety, unaware that smoking causes cancer, or that some would soon be conscripted forever from fish, chips, bread and butter, and a cigarette.
Big thanks again to Martin Gray for joining me. As I said, his book is called The Pretty Boys of Gangstertown, and I would heartily recommend it. It's published by Fly on the Wall Poetry Press, who are also an awesome little publishing house and very much worthy of your support. My name is Dane Cobain. You're listening to The Art Show on 106.6 FM at Wycombe Sound, and this is Gay Friend by Faiblesse Parfaite.
The shadows that but the mood is down. Trying to figure out if the agony on taste which of us has the greenest grass is a chore. Well, don't cut the eye with the solitude. Mine is worse since you or dude can't we at least agree on how to nurse our scars. Gay friend, gay friend, gay friend, my friend. You dress like a cliche, you frame me like a shrink. What would I do without you? I can't bear to think. There's good, the bad, and the obvious, the unthinkable. The shit think about it, there's you. Brunch break by my sanity. You refuse to judge, you're just there for me. You are so right, why is this so hard to admit? Gay friend, gay friend, gay friend. My friend, you dress like a cliche. You frame me like a shrink. What would I do without you? I can't bear to think. You have to proceed like a wary cat. Well, your values be cold, it will be cold. Times you shouldn't have to hide, we shouldn't have to hate. Let it be, let it all hang out. Gay friend, gay friend, my friend. You dress like a cliche, you frame me like a shrink. What would I do without you? I can't bear to live. Gay friend, my friend. You dress like a cliche, you frame me like a shrink. What would I do without you? I can't bear to
Love music, love talk, love Wycombe Sound.
Whatever career you're interested in, from film, music and the arts, to hair and beauty, construction, sports or healthcare, with Bucks College Group, you get more than a professional qualification, you get the Bucks College Factor. At our Aylesbury, Wycombe and Amersham campuses, you'll benefit from state-of-the-art facilities, with expert tuition and real industry experience. Something that top employers and universities are crying out for. Bucks College Factor. Search Bucks College Group.
From the 1st of April, your new Buckinghamshire Council will replace the existing county and district councils and continue to deliver all the services you are used to. Visit buckinghamshire.gov.uk.
Saturday nights from 8 p.m. till 10 p.m. Live in Studio 2 from the centre of High Wycombe. It's Kev Kinch in the house.
It's Saturday night.
This is Kev Kinch in the house.
Right, it's Saturday night. Let's do this.
Turn it up!
Hi, this is Kev Kinch, and I will be playing you the very best in house and dance music on your local radio station, Wycombe Sound, from 8 p.m. this Saturday night. I'll also be playing the very best reworks of those favourite old school tunes. So that's this Saturday from 8 p.m. Turn up the volume, and mind your bass bins, by the way.
With Kev Kinch, your Saturday night soundtrack is sorted.
This is a journey into sound.
The music just turns me on.
This is Wycombe Sound.
That was Fabulous Parfait with Gay Friend. You're listening to The Art Show on 106.6 FM at Wycombe Sound. I'm your host, Dane Cobain, and we've reached that part of the show where we share a few sort of entertainment recommendations to keep you going. So we're going to start by going straight over to Twanglin Jack Ford over in the Ilkshed for this week's album recommendation.
Follow up to OK Computer, the Tarangalila Symphony. by this gave it a lot of publicity. First performed, I heard stories of John Peel playing it in the 60s. The thing that makes this remarkable, I can see why a generation in rooms reeking of incense and patchouli, lights dimmed by paisley scarves. I first became aware of listening to 60s Pink Floyd and skinning up on the Ummagumma cover, and used it might find the Turangalila Symphony appealing. It is far out, man. This gave it a lot of publicity. There were also fake stories that it was used. I heard stories of John Peel playing it in the 60s. This is not true. I can see why a generation in rooms reeking of incense and patchouli is a bit like a lights dimmed by paisley. The glissando sounds are created by running a ring Floyd and skinning up on the Ummagumma cover. It also has keys. Might find the Turangalila Symphony appealing. Create a vibrato and a control panel and four speakers. There were also fake stories that it was used for the theme to the original Star Trek performances. This is not true, but it should give you an idea of the sound that is one of the star performers. It is a bit like a theremin. Along with the glissando sounds are created by running a ring up and down. The title is a word messian also has keys by joining two sounds side to side. One meaning vibrato, and the other roughly and a control panel and four speakers to vary the music tone. Was written to tell the tale of Tristram and Isolde. Performances of it Messiaen described it thus, and the Ond Martineau it is a love song, a hymn to joy, along love with that is virtuoso, irresistible, so transcending everything. The title is a word everything outside, created by joining joy that is superhuman. One meaning love, blinding, the other roughly meaning movement and Turangalila. Music was written to tell the full name of the one-eyed, purple-haired Messiaen described it thus: it is a love song, a hymn to joy. Musically, love that is fatal, irresistible, transcending every atonality, suppressing everything outside. Joy that is superhuman, so overwhelming. I found that the percussive sections reminded me of Turangalila. And then when investigating on Wikipedia, one-eyed, purple-haired Hannah Bernstein, composer of West Side Story, had conducted the first performance. Musically, it is imagine the soundtrack to a Hollywood film with little of the atonality, stroke Western to mid-20th century classical music. That would be the conventional orchestra. I found that the percussive sections reminded me of hummable but slightly twisted. And then when investigating it on Wikipedia, superimposed over that, I found that Leonard Bernstein, being composer by spaceships, conducting the first performance. Imagine the soundtrack to a Hollywood film noir stroke. Maybe it was because it was written just after Western the war, stroke music. The composing style gives the impression the conventional orchestra might only get bombastic horns, lush strings, all the hummable but slightly twisted melodies. The superimposed over that would be Olivier Messiaen ghosts being classical music for those who don't like swooping woo-woo and weeping cello effects of the Ond Martineau. Maybe it was because it was written just after the war that the composing style gives the impression that he was worried he might only get one chance and he was going to push all the buttons and pull out all the stops. The Turangalila Symphony, Olivier Messiaen, classical music for those who don't like classical music.
Alright, thank you Twanglin Jack Ford for this week's music recommendation. So I'm going to go ahead and jump to this week's book recommendation, and it's going to be a tough one to call because I've read a lot of really good books recently. I mean, I guess the one that I want to talk about the most actually has a title that I don't think I can say on radio. It's a book by Roald Dahl as well, which we all know him as like a children's author, although he wrote a bit of everything really. I think he actually wrote the screenplay for one of the James Bond movies, which is very cool. But yeah, this collection is called Switch, followed by a word that rhymes with switch. And it's 4 short stories that are like adult short stories, I guess you could say. They were first published in Playboy magazine of all places. So 2 of them are like fictitious journal extracts from a well-known hedonist, which were quite interesting. The first one in particular had quite a good twist at the end as well. And then there was one about like a perfume that kind of activates a lot of the hidden sort of sensory things that we have as as creatures, and basically kind of allows humans to sort of scent pheromones in the way that dogs do. And I actually can't remember what the other story was about. So the other story was where the switch comes from, and it's basically about a wife swap, and is a bit of a comedy. So yeah, they're not like, I don't know, your gran could probably read them and enjoy them, but so they're not like too graphic or anything like that, but they're definitely interesting little reads, especially if you've only come across Roald Dahl as like a children's writer before. It kind of shows a lot of his versatility as a writer, I think, and I'm really glad I picked it up. And for this week's movie, I think the only thing that I've watched since last week's show has been The Mist, which is a 2007 film. It's based on a Stephen King novella or short story. I'm not sure which of the two. And it's basically, I mean, I guess it's up there in my favourite films, but mainly because of the ending. I think the ending's really well done. But I do enjoy the general story and the creepiness of The Mist as well. It's a perfect one for Halloween. If you haven't seen it, a lot of the effects are kind of dated because, again, it is like 13 years old now. But I enjoy it. So, yeah, The Mist. Go ahead and check it out if you haven't already. So anyway, that brings us about to the end of this week's show. As always, thank you to my guest, who was Martin Gray, the poet from Fly on the Wall Poetry Press. Thank you to Twangling Jack Ford for providing his music review. Thank you to all of the bands and musicians whose music I played in this show. My name is Dane Cobain. You can reach out to me here at the studio on dane.cobain@wycombesound.org.uk. That's dane.cobain @wycombesound.org.uk. And I particularly want to hear from poets and musicians who might have MP3s that they want to share. And also we have a Facebook page, so you can find us on Facebook if you just search for The Art Show Wycombe Sound. And we're also distributed on iTunes and Spotify and other podcast platforms, so you can catch up if you miss an episode. So as I say, that's pretty much the end of this week's episode. There's just one last thing to do, and that is to share a little bit more music. So this is Occasionally David with She Loves Stephen Bohr.
Even more than she loves me. Stephen Bohr is 44 and I'm as old as HMV. Bang goes my pension plan, attention span, oh riddle me ree.
Thank you.